first step into Hell Is Us, it doesn't feel like a video game at all. It feels like stepping into a wound, a scarred nation called Hadea that has been isolated for decades, closed off from the rest of the world, crushed under an authoritarian rule that stamped out religious diversity and replaced it with a single suffocating cultural identity. This backdrop is heavy, darker than what most games dare to touch, and yet the developers lean into it with both sincerity and a kind of heavy-handedness, as if they know they're holding fire in their hands but can't quite resist showing off the sparks. War has always been cruelest to those who cannot escape it. The civilians, the families, the nameless lives scattered in its wake. And Rogue Factor tries to embody this truth by stripping away all the comforts players have grown used to. There is no map to unfold, no quest log to hold your hand, no blinking objective markers to reassure you that you're heading in the right direction. There is only a compass, some notes, and your own intuition. And in this way, the game forces you into the skin of someone lost in wartime chaos, a wanderer piecing together meaning from fragments, scraps, overheard whispers, faint trails. It is confusing, often frustrating, but in that frustration lies its authenticity, its immersion, its truth. You play as Remy, a man without a loud voice, without witty quips or unnecessary exposition, a man who was smuggled out of Hadea as a child and has now returned as an adult in search of answers about the land that birthed him. And in his silence, there is a kind of refreshing honesty. In an age where protagonists never shut up, filling every empty moment with forced personality, like in Horizon Forbidden West or God of War, Remy stands apart by saying nothing at all. His quiet is unnerving at first, but ultimately fitting, because this is not his story alone. It is Hadea's, and Hadea screams louder than any hero could. Exploration becomes the heartbeat of Hell Is Us. The game revels in letting you lose yourself, stumbling, backtracking, questioning your instincts, until finally you find the thread that carries you forward. And when you are not walking in silence, you are fighting. The combat wears its influences proudly. Dark Souls, Nioh, all those stamina-driven duels where timing is everything. Here, you face the limbic entities, pale, unsettling monsters that can only be felled with equally mysterious limbic weapons. On paper, this sounds like a thrilling dance of blades and shadows, and for the first few hours it is. Stamina bars deplete, parries land in perfect rhythm, dodges up a last second save your life, and it feels fluid, responsive, alive. But then the curtain falls back, and you realize you've already seen everything the game has to offer in combat. There are only 5 enemy types, most of them recycled endlessly by the time you reach the 3rd major area. The game introduces linked enemies who can summon a haze to make themselves temporarily invincible, a mechanic that seems clever at first, but soon wears out its welcome, padding fights with needless delay rather than tension. The combat isn't broken, far from it. It is polished, responsive, and occasionally exhilarating, but it runs out of ideas too quickly, never evolving over the 30 hours it demands of you. The weapon system fares no better. You dedicate an element called a limbic sphere to your weapon upon its first upgrade, locking in the glyphs you can use from then on. It could have been an agonizing, meaningful choice, a decision that defines your playstyle permanently. But instead, the game hands you upgraded versions of every possible weapon and sphere combination as you progress, stripping the weight from that choice until it feels like nothing at all. None of it matters, and that hollowness undermines the hours you invest. And yet, despite these failings, Hell Is Us redeems itself through the act of exploration. Its open world is not just a backdrop, it is a character, a riddle, a tapestry woven with sorrow and history. You may be solving a puzzle that stretches across villages, feeling like a genius when it finally clicks, or you may be retrieving a family's dog left behind in occupied territory, a small kindness in the middle of endless cruelty. The land itself tells stories if you are willing to listen, and in those moments, the game is at its best. But too often, it sabotages itself, doubting its own philosophy. Consider the limbic keys you collect throughout your journey. Each one comes with a cryptic description, hints like the coffer of the buried forge of the earth. Perfect, you think. Just enough mystery to make you search, connect clues, and immerse yourself. But then the game undermines itself by flat out telling you where to go and what to do. The same problem infects side quests, called good deeds, where pop-ups spoil the discovery by pointing you directly to the solution. The immersion, so carefully built, cracks under the weight of this handholding. Still, when the game trusts you, when it stops doubting, its puzzles shine. I remember stumbling upon a rusted safe in a library's trash. Hours later, in a distant village, I learned its owner had set the password after his son's personal details, but had forgotten them amid the chaos of displacement. I hunted down the child's ID card, pieced together the fragments, and finally opened the safe across the country. That moment felt earned, rewarding, cinematic. It was proof of what this game could be when it embraced its vision. Other puzzles, based on cryptic symbols, like roses symbolizing marriage, could feel unfair, but they at least carried the weight of mystery. Exploration, however, exposes another weakness. In taking inspiration from Dark Souls, the developers forgot that an open world needs freedom. You cannot jump, you cannot swim, you cannot climb. Elden Ring understood that vastness demands mobility, but here you are limited, constrained, forced to run everywhere without meaningful variation. At first, the lack of a map and reliance on landmarks creates tension, but soon the world reveals itself to be too condensed, too small. You stop using the compass, not because you've mastered survival, but because there is little to master. The philosophy of disorientation collapses when the terrain itself becomes too familiar. And yet, whatever flaws it bears, Hadea is mesmerizing to inhabit. The art direction is nothing short of spellbinding. Lake Kainan, with its tranquil serenity, feels like the only safe breath of air in the entire country. The Auriga Museum, with its surreal control-like energy, feels imported from another universe. Each region bursts with history. Each ruin begs to be stared at. Each landmark whispers stories of what was lost. Even when the narrative stumbles, the visuals carry it. The conversations inspired by Pathologic's eerie dialogues, the sleek datapad UI, all reinforce the immersion. Only the HUD and camera framing betray the artistry, feeling pedestrian by comparison. The story itself bites off more than it can chew. It begins grounded in political manipulation, genocide justified through twisted history, the machinery of authoritarianism, and for a while it feels razor-sharp, fearless. But then the finale pivots toward a mysterious, shadowy villain, focusing on a vague big bad rather than digging deeper into the chilling political allegory it had so carefully built. The occupied towns, the mass graves, the refugee camps, these speak louder and truer than any cutscene, and they carry more thematic weight than the final act dares to. It is a missed opportunity, but not a fatal one, because the world never stops reminding you what's at stake. And so we are left with a paradox. Hell Is Us is bold enough to strip away modern conveniences, bold enough to demand you think, bold enough to set its story in a nation scarred by genocide and suppression. But it is also timid, afraid of pushing too hard, afraid that players might quit if it truly forced them into the darkness. Its handholding undermines its vision, its combat exhausts itself too quickly, its traversal feels shackled. Yet its world, its puzzles, its art, its themes, they whisper of a masterpiece that could have been, if only the developers had trusted us. And maybe that's why it lingered lingering, not because it is perfect, but because it dared. It dared to frustrate, to confuse, to unsettle. It dared to believe that silence can speak, that absence can be a mechanic, that wandering without guidance can reveal truths maps will never show. For 30 hours, it made me think about war, about identity, about propaganda, about the stories that are buried beneath official narratives. It is flawed, yes, but flawed in the way of something ambitious, something reaching higher than most games even attempt. Hell Is Us is not for everyone, and maybe it doesn't even fully succeed at what it tries to be. But in its silence, in its haunting landscapes, in its contradictions, it becomes more than the sum of its mechanics. It becomes a mirror, showing us what happens when art dares to question itself, when a game asks not just for your time, but for your patience, your thought, your willingness to be lost. And in a world of shallow distractions, maybe that alone makes it worth playing.